Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl, and welcome to the Eagles bye week. Gotta say, this year I really sort of like where the bye falls, sort of right in the middle of the season. Gives us a good week to sort of catch our breaths before we make the final stretch run. That was one of the major problems I had last year, is the fact that our bye week was way too early. And I think that really sort of killed the sort of early momentum we had built up. But I think it falls the perfect spot this year, and really sort of gives us some extended break as we go into that stretch run to really try and see what we can do to put this division away. There are a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, it was after my cousin and I did the reaction video to the Broncos game last week. We both realized that we didn't really talk about Jay Ajayi, which was obviously a huge oversight on our part. And really, I hadn't made any comments on that since we had made that trade to pick him up. And really, if you think about it, it's a great trade that I think we made. I think he's a perfect addition to this team. You've only got LeGarrette Blount on a one-year deal, and he's on the older side anyway. So Jay Ajayi, who's a very similar type of running back, is going to be someone that we're going to be able to keep for the long term, and we can incorporate him now into the offense. And obviously that pays huge dividends in the Broncos game with a big touchdown run before half, really sort of cementing that game and putting it away. So for that, I think that's a great trade. And the fact we only give up a fourth rounder is great. And think of it this way, that's the fourth rounder that we got from Minnesota. So we traded Sam Bradford for Derek Barnett and Jay Ajayi, which sounds insane and just goes to show how lopsided that trade really was for us. The other big news that came out was the fact that they signed Jernigan to a long-term contract. He's on a 4-year deal now. So we've got him locked up for a long time. And once again, the way we got him was really a steal, because there's people saying, oh, we traded a third-round pick for him. No, we didn't. We flipped spots in the third round for him. So we went to the back of the third round, and the Ravens came to the front of the third round, and in exchange, we got Jernigan out of the deal. So really, we didn't even lose a draft pick. We just lost position in that round. So that was a steal as well. He's played tremendous this year and has really complimented Fletcher Cox in the inside of that defensive line. And, I was worried that we were really going to lose something when Benny Logan came back last year, and I sort of kind of saw the writing on the wall on that one. I think it was going to be hard for them to keep Benny Logan, but Jernigan has performed just as well as Benny Logan did and has really stepped in well and has really solidified that defensive line. It's probably one of the best in football right now. So once again, great signing. I think I really like signing him for a long-term deal. And that's one of the things you can do when you've got a young quarterback, because, Carson Wentz still has a few years on his rookie deal where he's not making insane money like most quarterbacks do. So from that perspective as well, it's really a good deal to get him locked up for long term, so that we have some real core defensive line guys now signed up for several years. And when it comes right down to it, you really have to give a lot of credit to Howie Roseman on all this. All three players that I'm going to be talking about today, Jay Ajayi, Tim Jernigan, and I'm going to be talking about Carson Wentz in a moment, are all because of Howie Roseman's dealings. We got Jay Ajayi really for a steal, getting him for a fourth-round pick. We got Jernigan on a steal as well, and signed him now to a long-term deal. And then, of course, the other big one is Carson Wentz, and the fact that it floors me that the Browns let him go and did not want to draft him with the second pick in the draft. And the fact that we got him is got to be one of the best things that's happened to Philadelphia sports in this century. And that, of course, is because he's really turned into an MVP candidate this year. His numbers are absolutely off the charts, and I just want to take a look at him for a minute. So far, those are Wentz's numbers on the season. If we go ahead and translate that in terms of what he's on pace for, that's what it turns to. When I was looking at some of the Eagles' past statistics and all that kind of stuff, it floored me that we've never had a quarterback throw for over 4,000 yards, and Carson Wentz is on pace to do that. So it blows me away that we've never had a quarterback go over 4,000 yards all the years we had Randall, all the years we had McNabb. I know 4,000 yards was a much less common thing back in the older days of the NFL. But in, the last 30 years, there's a lot of guys that have thrown for over 4,000 yards. And the fact that we haven't had one guy go over that benchmark really sort of surprises me. The record right now is 3,916 by Donovan McNabb. So Carson Wentz is well on his way to go past that this year. Ironically enough, when you look at attempts and completions, Carson Wentz already set the franchise records in those categories last year. So he already has those records. In current pace that he's got, 313 completions would be 5th all-time for an Eagles quarterback in a season, and 517 attempts would be 7th all-time for the Eagles franchise. So he's once again having a great year by those standards, even though he's probably not going to break his own records, which actually is probably a good thing considering how past happy they went last year. But the big one really, of course, is touchdowns, and that's the one that really sort of blows me away. Carson Wentz is on pace to throw for 41 touchdowns. Currently, the franchise record for touchdown passes in a season is 32 by Sonny Jurgensen in 1961. Carson Wentz is on pace to blow by that. He's already only 9 away from that. In fact, 23 touchdown passes for the season, if he doesn't throw another one, is already tied for 11th for a franchise, for the Eagles franchise for quarterback passes on a season. So already he's getting to, where it's going to be, a top 10 kind of number. Then I started to do a little bit digging in terms of, what other quarterbacks have done. And in terms of past quarterbacks, here are their best numbers for what they've thrown on a season in touchdown passes. And you can see there are some big names on this list. You've got McNabb at 31, you've got Cunningham at 30, Jaworski's at 27, and Van Brocklin in his best season had 24, so he's only 1 away from that. You can see already where he's on pace in terms of touchdown passes for the season. He's ready to blow by all former Eagles quarterbacks. So we're through 9 games this season already, and Carson Wentz already has a touchdown pass in every one of those 9 games. If you go back to last season, he had touchdown passes in the last 2 games of last season. So he's now gone 11 straight games with touchdown passes. The franchise record for an Eagles quarterback in terms of touchdown passes for games in a row goes to Randall Cunningham with 18. So if Carson Wentz plays the rest of the season and throws a touchdown pass in every game, he will match that record set by Randall Cunningham. If we look at some of the other Eagles quarterbacks in terms of what they've done in this area, he's already sort of in some good company in terms of quarterbacks that have done this before. After Cunningham's record of 18, you drop down to the next one. Cunningham had 13 straight games where he had touchdown passes. And then you go down to 12 with Sonny Jurgensen, and then you're in 11, which is where Wentz is already. And guys that have done that in terms of 11 straight games include Norm Van Brocklin, Donovan McNabb, and Ron Jaworski. So all of those guys, this is right around where Carson Wentz is right now. That's what they've done. Now, there is a caveat on Jaworski and McNabb. This is only counting regular season games. Both of them did that in game, and where it sort of went across 2 seasons, and there were some postseason games in between there that actually extend their streak because they both had touchdown passes in the playoff games that they played in the interim. In the case of McNabb, it would go up 3 to 14. In the case of Jaworski, it would go up 2 to 13. So that's probably a more representative look in terms of streaks if you're counting postseason games. So there is that one caveat that, technically, if you're only counting regular season games, it goes 18 Cunningham, 13 Cunningham, but really McNabb at 14 is in there if you do count the playoff games. But it's not just that he's throwing touchdown passes, he's throwing multiple touchdowns in a game, and he's now gone 5 straight games where he's had 2 or more touchdowns. And that's already started getting into some rare errors as it relates to Eagles quarterbacks. The record is 7, which was done twice by McNabb and Sonny Jurgensen. Once again, you've sort of got to place a caveat on Jurgensen because of the playoff thing. And in this instance, it would be because it wouldn't count because he didn't throw 2 or more touchdown passes in the playoff game. So in that instance, he would drop off the list. But if you only count regular season games, then it goes McNabb and Jurgensen both with 7. Jurgensen then did 6 a little bit later that season. And then you've got Wentz at 5, along with Jaworski and Van Brocklin. So already he's in some rare errors that relates to multiple games in a row with 2 or more touchdowns. And, if he goes 2 more there, he matches the franchise record, which would mean he'd have to do multiple touchdown passes against Dallas and against Chicago. So how good is he playing in his second year? Let's take a focus away from Eagles quarterbacks and look at the NFL as a whole. The NFL record for touchdown passes in the first 2 seasons belongs to Dan Marino. He had 68 touchdown passes in his first season. Currently, Carson Wentz sits at 39 with 7 games to play. Obviously, he is not going to catch Dan Marino. But what he could do is catch the guys that are in second and third place. Derek Carr is second with 53 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. And then number 3 is a tie between Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson, both with 52 touchdown passes in their first 2 years. It really won't take that much for Carson Wentz to match that based on the current pace that he's going at. And that is, it would only take him 2 touchdown passes a game from now to the end of the season to match what Derek Carr did. Like I said, catching Marino is probably way out there because he would need to throw over 4 touchdown passes in a game. He's never even thrown more than 4 touchdown passes in a game, although there were a couple of games this season where he probably could have if he wanted to, specifically thinking about the Arizona and Denver games. But currently, he's never thrown for more than 4 touchdown passes in a season, so we'll forget about that one. But he certainly could put himself in the conversation to get above where Peyton Manning, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr are at 52 and 53. Now, the one interesting caveat to all of this is Dak Prescott actually is tied right now with Carson Wentz at 39 touchdown passes. They both have 39, and it's kind of funny because it's flipped. It's exactly 16 and 23, except for Carson Wentz, he had 16 in his first season, 23 in his second season. For Dak Prescott, it's just the opposite. He had 23 in his first season, and he's at 16 now for his second season. So obviously, both those guys could extend that for what their second season totals are, and I fully expect that to happen. But it's interesting to see if one of those guys ends up pulling away, and so far, Wentz has been the one that's been doing it. So that'll be another thing we can follow as we get later in the season as well. And all this really leads to the question, where is this team going? If you watched my video I did at the beginning of the season, I predicted 9-7 for this team. Well, we're 1 win away from that already. Think about this. We're at the bye week. We already have more wins than we did last year for the whole season, and we're only at the bye week. And we're only 1 off what a lot of people thought they'd probably be. Most people thought they'd be around 9-7. Maybe they get lucky and get to 10-6. We're only 1 win away from a 9-7 or a winning season this year. And obviously, that is not going to be good enough for the way this season has been going. We've got to get much further beyond that. And it really raises the question then, what should we be expecting for this year? And I think we've been sort of conditioned as fans to assume that we've got to have patience for championship runs. And that's because of things like when we had the Eagles in the early 2000s with Donovan McNabb. It was a process. It took several years to sort of build up to when we got to the Super Bowl in 2004. So that was, like I said, it was sort of a build-up to that. There was years where we made the playoffs, won a game, and then got knocked out. Then there was years that we got to the NFC Championship game and lost. And then finally broke through to the Super Bowl. So it was sort of a process. Every year you took sort of another step, and we never had this huge jump that we went right to the Super Bowl. And as Philly fans, that goes for other sports as well. We sort of had that with the 2008 Phillies, who won the World Series. Well, we had made the playoffs the year before, and you can sort of see over the couple of years leading up to 2008 that the Phillies were getting better and better. So I think as Philadelphia fans, we're sort of conditioned to say, all right, well, it's got to take a couple of years till we're going to get to that level. But I'm going to tell you that that is not necessarily the case, and I'm saying that because of number 11. And it's not because you're going to think, well, he's only in his second year. How good can he do in the playoffs in his second year? I'm here to tell you he can do pretty good in his second year, and that's because of some of the quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls in their second year in the league. There's actually quite a few. Going in reverse order in terms of guys that have won in their second year in the league. Most recently, it was Russell Wilson. Before that, it was Ben Roethlisberger. Before that, it was Tom Brady. And before that, it was Kurt Warner. All 4 of those guys won the Super Bowl in their second year in the league. For 2 of those, they had started both seasons. So in Russell Wilson and Ben Roethlisberger's cases, they're sort of in the same boat that Carson Wentz is in, that that they played the first season and then ended up winning it, starting the second season as well and winning it. In the case of Brady and Kurt Warner, they were backups in their first year and then came in their second year and won it basically in their first year starting, but their second year in the league. But that raises another interesting question. If you're going to guys that won it in their second year as a starter and want to go extend that one further, so someone who won it in his third year in the league, but his second year as a starter was Joe Montana. So guys winning their second year as a starter or second year in the league is not uncommon. In fact, it's happened with a lot of players and a lot of players that we consider to be really good and all-time greats. So that's, if we think that Carson Wentz is on the trajectory to possibly be one of the great quarterbacks, certainly one of the great quarterbacks in Eagles history, him winning the Super Bowl in his second year is not that outrageous, especially when you consider how well the team is playing as a whole, and especially how well this defense is playing. So I'm here to tell you that this is not something that we necessarily need to have reservations about and assume that it's not going to happen. There's no way it can happen this quickly. It certainly could happen this quickly. And at this point, if they get to the Super Bowl and lose, obviously I'd be disappointed, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, that would be a major accomplishment, and I'm not going to, you know, poo-poo that. Interestingly enough, another guy who got to the Super Bowl in his second year but lost it was Dan Marino. So right again, once again, there are, you know, another one of the greats was getting there early in his career but losing. So you can see, though, that there is precedent for young quarterbacks to get their teams to the Super Bowl and then also win the Super Bowl. So it's certainly a possibility. If we get there, that would be great. At this point, if we continue where we're at, right now we're the #1 seed in the NFC, and I know there's a lot of football yet to play, but if we continue that way and we stay the top seed and we have home field advantage, I will be absolutely disappointed with this team if we don't get to the Super Bowl, because that's how well this team is playing, and that's the way this team is playing. That's where they should have their sights set, and there's no reason why we as fans can't expect that from this team. One other thing, while I'm wearing my number 11 jersey here, I got to talk about, and that's the fact that I forget if it was in one of the games that they put the graphic up or if it was another television show I was watching, but other number 11 quarterbacks in Eagles history include Tommy Thompson and Norm Van Brocklin. And what do those two quarterbacks have in common? Well, they're the only two Eagles quarterbacks to win championships in this city. So Tommy Thompson won the 48 and 49 championships, and Norm Van Brocklin won the championship in 1960. So, you know, if there's any sort of karma around the number 11 for our quarterback, maybe that's another thing we can sort of hang our hat on if you're a superstitious kind of person. So that's another reason to maybe really celebrate this guy, because he wears a number that's been successful for us in the past, and maybe it can be. If you didn't see it yet, I posted a compilation video yesterday of some of Carson Wentz, or not some, all of Carson Wentz's touchdown passes for this season up through week 9. I'll go ahead and include a link to that up in the corner. You can click on that and watch all the touchdown passes that he's thrown through this first 9 weeks of the season. And really, when you watch them all one after the other, it really just sort of blows me away how well he's playing and the pace he's playing. Clearly an MVP candidate right now. And I can only expect that if he continues to stay healthy, that's the big thing, obviously, always in the NFL, is health. If he can continue to stay healthy, I don't think the sky's the limit on where this team can go this year. And I'm just excited about it. I'm thrilled beyond belief about it, and can't wait to see what's next. And what is next is the Dallas Cowboys, and we'll have that game coming up next Sunday night. Of course, I'll check in before that and give my preview and prediction video. Until then, fly Eagles fly.